Hello, I'm KillerDarks and welcome to a short video in Space Engineers. We're just going to go through the setup for the auto-launch drones, such as the one I used in the Cardnic one and the repair drone, which I'll link below for anybody who hasn't seen those. Having a discussion recently with Tozzlework over on Reddit, decided to put this short how-to video together. What we have here is an example drone which has a hydrogen tank for fuel. It has thrust in every direction, with the majority of it being up and brake thrust. It has 2 timer blocks, 4 event controllers, an action relay, an antenna, one of the new communications blocks, message blocks, whatever they're called, and a gyroscope. And obviously the connector that you can see here holding it to the base. I've already gone in and set up the blocks just to make this a bit quicker, but I'll go through what it is that I've done. So the first thing I did was renamed all the blocks that were used on this drone to have the prefix of ED for example drone. I've created 2 groups for the forwards thrust and 2 groups for the backwards thrust. So the lift thrust here is the forward or lift, and the brake thrust here is what will slow it down when it's moving. And then one group that's just got all of the thrusters in. And if you're using multiple tanks, I suggest grouping them, especially on drones where it doesn't matter how many groups you create, you're going to, remove them from this list. If you are doing this on ships, you're going to fly a lot. It can be better to replace some of those groups with additional timer blocks. I'll go through the setup and you'll see where they will be used. The first timer block we've got here is a launch timer block. So in this block, on each of the pages, the first 2 lines is the 2 different groups individually increasing thrust override. So for that I just went ED lift, right click, increase thrust override, did the same on the second one, and then use the going along each of the tabs until that's in each of the tabs. It takes most, if not all, of 2 full timer blocks to do that, or 1 timer block with 2 groups, which is why I went for the 2 groups. And then next on the line here, we're going to turn on each of the other event controllers that this drone uses, which I'll make sure are already off before we start. The next thing along the line, on just this first line, is turning on each of the other 3 event controllers and the last timer block, disconnecting the connector, and turning off the brake thrusters, because we don't want the reverse thrust being on. They're specifically set to off, not on off, so that there's no chance of it interrupting with the connector's docking maneuver, which we'll now cover. So the first event controller I've renamed dock, and what this does is it checks whether the connector is connected, specifically the connector on the drone. If we go into the actions, on each page again, let me scroll to the first page. On each page it has an item in the second. So this first block is anything when the activity is triggered. So in this case, if the connector is connected, it'll do this first slot. And if it's disconnected, it'll do this second slot. So when it's disconnected, we want to turn the thrusters on. We want to turn the tank off stockpile. And we want to turn the batteries onto auto. So the next blocks, which will be turned on by that first timer block, is the thrust on, thrust off, and space blocks. So we'll go through these in turn. Thrust on checks for a grid speed equal to or less than 97 meters per second. Of course, if you're using a mod to go beyond the normal speed, you'll need to adjust this for your world settings. I'm using vanilla here, so 97 is 3 meters per second under the maximum speed. The reason I use 2 separate event controls for this, in the past, if testing in a busy world or on a server, if you set it to 1 event controller that triggers, on either side of the event being matched, it can sort of create an issue where the blocks try to turn on and off at the same time, and it might either fall out of the sky or continue to accelerate, which we don't want. Which is why I use 2 blocks. So whenever the grid speed is equal to or less than 97, all it does is turn on the lifting thrusters. And then the thrust off, similar setup, grid speed changed equal to or greater than 99 meters a second. So with that 2 meters per second buffer to stop the issue I described before. And all that does is turn those thrusters off. so that we're always going to be traveling between 97 and 99 meters per second. And then the last one here, space, this checks when the natural gravity has gone equal to or less than 0. And this has a string of actions. First thing it does is start the timer block, which we'll go through what that does in a second. It turns off the two thrusters controlling, the two event controllers controlling the thrust to make sure that they don't continue to toggle on and off, and turns off that thrust. This is a learned lesson. I didn't have this in earlier versions, and sometimes it would reach space when the thrust was on, and when the event controllers went off, it would then just keep the thrust on for the full time that we're trying to save fuel, a full 5 second, 10-second burn, depending on how long you've got the next timer set. Turning on the antenna so that we can see it's up there if we're just using this on its own. On this particular occasion, I've added the broadcast controller just to send a message saying it's in space, mostly just to test that out with it being new. And then on the very last page, and I always put this on the last page, turn off the block itself. That is the space event controller, so that it doesn't trigger if we, skim the atmosphere, the gravity when we're flying around manually. And then we will go into the space timer block. I have set this one to 5 seconds because it's a small drone. If I was doing this with a big ship, I would set it to 10 seconds or maybe even more, so that it's further away from the gravity, so when we start flying manually, we don't sort of catch the edge of gravity so easily. So this one has a few pages again. On each of the pages, we've again gone in and put the thrust override, but this time decrease thrust override, with both groups all the way along every page. And then on the very last page here, I've got it setting the new action relay to send a signal to turn on a light on the base. This is just a proof of concept before I switch to laser antennas on a future project. And then again to turn the block off itself so that block isn't wasting power or anything. I got into the habit of doing this when designing many drones that were going to be based out in space. If you're using a solar array like the Cardinal 1, I would put the hinges or whatever mechanism you're using to align those now into this block here, so it's only when it's decelerating. And there is one more block we need to add to this sequence that I haven't done yet. Yes, I have. Which is here on one of the lines. We just need to turn back on the brake thrust so that we go from full acceleration back to 0. This is especially useful so you can launch and forget, and then you can go in later on to remote control the drones to wherever you want them to be. For example, the Cardinal 1s, I rode a string right out to the moon. Okay, this is fully set up. I've already put the launch timer block on my hotbar, so I'll just push the number and we'll wait 3 seconds. So you can see there, the thrust override has come on, the ship is accelerating, and as soon as it's reached that 99 there, the thruster cut off. And whenever it hits 97, it'll come back on. So you can see there, the thrusters are just flicking on for the briefest of seconds. Whenever the speed is dropping below, they're coming on and then they're going back off again. This thing's so small and there's so many thrusters that from above you can't actually see it firing. So I'll cut forward to when this has arrived in space to see the end part. If you want to see the full cycle, just watch one of those 2 linked videos. As you can probably see there on the left, it has actually popped up saying example drone arrived in space. And it also seems to include my name as the owner of the block, which I didn't know would happen. Good to see. And there the thrusters have kicked in after the 5-second delay and brought this thing to a complete halt, and the antenna has turned on, so we can now remote control in and do whatever we want to with that drone. And hopefully, if we exit the seat as the engineer, this green light has turned on, which means the relay also sent its message and that was received. Brilliant test for later stuff. If you do want to see any more complicated versions, do leave a comment below. I will be designing a drone soon to fly passengers between the Earth-like and space, which will include atmospheric thrusters doing the majority of the lift while it can, and then switching to hydrogen only once that's no longer working, in order to get away with using small hydrogen tanks to try and make it look more like a taxi. If you want to see more content like this, you can either hang around for more videos or join more on Twitch for regular streams over there, primarily going through various scenarios, both vanilla and workshop. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time for more Space Engineers.